I just lost it in front of my family. After years of bullying my disabled son, I had no choice but to call them out in front of everyone. You won't believe how they reacted. Hi, so this has been bothering me for a while now, and I really need some outside perspective. I, 35F, have a son, 10M, who is in a wheelchair because of a medical condition he's had since he was little. At every single family gathering, my nephews, 8M and 12M, make fun of him. They tease him about not being able to walk, call him names, and even mess around with his wheelchair. It's honestly heartbreaking to watch. I've spoken to the boys a few times myself, telling them it's not okay, and explaining how much it hurts my son. I've also talked to my brother and SEL about it more than once, but they just laugh it off or say something like, "Oh, they're just kids being kids." It's so frustrating because they never take it seriously. The last straw was at our most recent family gathering. My nephews were at it again, making fun of my son while he just sat there looking like he wanted to disappear. I told them to stop, and they just rolled their eyes and walked away like I wasn't even there. I completely lost it. I went straight to my brother and told him off in front of everyone. I said it's his job as a parent to teach his kids to be kind and respectful, especially to family. I pointed out that their behavior is cruel, not just kids having fun, and that it's been hurting my son. I also told him that if he doesn't start disciplining his kids, I won't be attending family gatherings anymore because I'm not going to keep putting him through that. My brother got really defensive and said I was overreacting. My SIL jumped in and accused me of trying to make their boys feel bad for just playing around. I was so angry I just left with my son. Now, the family is split. Some people are on my side saying I did the right thing by standing up for my son. Others think I should have handled it privately and not made a scene. My brother and SIL are furious with me and refuse to apologize or even talk about it. So, aita for finally blowing up and drawing a line. Update 1. So after that last family gathering, things have been pretty tense. My brother and SIL didn't reach out, and I wasn't about to call them either. A few days later, my mom called me and said she wanted to have a family mediation at her house to smooth things over. I was already skeptical because, let's be real, my brother and SIL never take accountability for anything. But I agreed because my mom insisted this was the only way to keep the family from falling apart. She promised it would be fair, and everyone would get a chance to speak. Fast forward to the day of the mediation, I showed up with my son. My mom had set up her living room like it was a courtroom or something, with chairs in a circle and snacks on the coffee table. My brother and SIL were already there with their kids, and I could tell from the looks on their faces that this was going to be a disaster. My mom started by saying she wanted everyone to have a chance to share their feelings and find a solution because family is too important to let this divide us. I went first and laid everything out. I explained how much the bullying was hurting my son, how I'd tried to handle it privately multiple times, and how their kids being kids excuse wasn't cutting it anymore. I even asked my son if he wanted to share how he felt, but he just shook his head and stared at the floor. Honestly, that broke my heart even more. When it was my brother's turn, he started by saying I was being too sensitive, and that his boys didn't mean any harm. He said, "They're just roughhousing. They don't even understand what they're doing." SIL chimed in with, "They're not bullies, they're just playful. Maybe your son needs to toughen up a little." I could feel my blood boiling, but I kept my cool because I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose it again. Then my mom asked the boys if they wanted to say anything. The 12-year-old shrugged and said, "We were just joking around. It's not that big of a deal." The 8-year-old just mumbled something about not meaning to be mean. I couldn't believe it. They've been tormenting my son for years, and this was all they had to say. My mom turned to me and said, "See, they didn't mean any harm. Maybe this is just a misunderstanding." That's when I lost it again. I told everyone that this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a pattern of behavior that's been ignored and enabled for far too long. I said my son shouldn't have to toughen up to deal with being bullied by his own family. I told my brother and SIL that their lack of parenting was the real problem and that my son deserved an apology. My brother stood up and said, "We're not going to apologize for something that was just harmless fun." SIL added, "If you're so upset about it, maybe you should just stay away from family gatherings. Clearly, you can't handle being around us." At that point, I grabbed my son's hand and said, "You know what? That's exactly what we'll do." I walked out and didn't look back. Since then, I've been getting texts and calls from other family members. Some are supportive and say they're proud of me for standing up for my son. Others are saying I'm tearing the family apart and that I need to be the bigger person. My mom is upset because now she's worried about what Thanksgiving and Christmas are going to look like. She keeps telling me to make amends for the sake of the family, but I'm done sacrificing my son's happiness to keep the peace. Here's the kicker, though. A few days ago, my son came home from school and handed me a drawing. It was of him in his wheelchair, surrounded by what he said were his real family. It was me, my mom, my dad, and a few cousins who've always been kind to him. He said, "These are the people who love me." I almost cried right there. It was a reminder that family isn't always about blood. It's about who shows up for you and treats you with love and respect. I've decided we're going to start making new traditions. Maybe we'll spend the holidays with friends or go on trips instead of subjecting ourselves to more of this toxic family drama. My son deserves to feel safe and loved, and if that means cutting out certain people, so be it. I'm still open to reconciliation if my brother and SIL ever decide to take responsibility and actually parent their kids. But until then, I'm done trying to fix something they clearly don't care about. Update 2. So, cutting ties with my brother and SIL has been both a relief and a challenge. After the whole family mediation debacle, I've been focusing on making life better for my son and me. But of course, drama doesn't just disappear. Turns out, my decision to walk away has stirred up even more chaos in the family, and it's honestly ridiculous how far some people will go to avoid accountability. A few weeks after the blow-up, my mom called me again. She said my brother and SIL were still upset and felt I disrespected them by walking out. Disrespected them? Are you kidding me? Apparently they're mad because now their boys are confused about why we don't want to see them anymore. My mom told me I needed to explain to my nephews why we weren't coming around, because they're just kids and don't understand what they did wrong. At first, I thought maybe this was an opportunity to teach them something about kindness and respect, but then I realized it's not my job to parent someone else's kids, especially when their own parents refuse to do it. I told my mom that if my brother and SIL want their kids to understand, they can explain it themselves. They're the ones who allowed this behavior to go unchecked for years, and they're the ones who need to fix it. My mom sighed and said, "You're making this so hard for everyone." I reminded her that this wasn't about everyone. It was about protecting my son. He's finally starting to feel more confident and happy now that he doesn't have to deal with their bullying, and I'm not going to jeopardize that just to make things easier for the adults in the family. Meanwhile, my brother's been running his mouth to anyone who will listen. He's telling people that I'm overreacting and trying to turn the family against him. A cousin of ours called me the other day to say she'd heard from my brother that I'd banned my son from seeing his cousins because I'm too sensitive. I had to explain the whole situation to her, and thankfully, she was understanding. She even said she'd talk to my brother about how wrong he's been, but I'm not holding my breath for that to go anywhere. The surprising part is how supportive some people have been. A few relatives I'd always considered neutral have reached out to say they're proud of me for standing up for my son. One of my uncles even invited us over for a barbecue last weekend, and it was the first time in a while that I felt like we could just relax and enjoy ourselves without any drama. My son had a blast playing with some of the other kids there, and seeing him smile like that reminded me why I made this decision in the first place. But here's where things took a weird turn. About a week ago, I got a message from my SEL. It was short and to the point. "We need to talk about this for the kids' sake." I was honestly shocked she even reached out, but I agreed to meet her for coffee. I figured maybe she'd had a change of heart and wanted to apologize or at least try to make things right. When we met up, she started by saying she'd been thinking a lot about what happened. For a moment, I thought she was going to take some responsibility, but nope. She went on to say that she and my brother feel like I'm overprotective and that my son needs to learn how to deal with the real world. She actually said, "Kids are going to be mean sometimes, and sheltering him isn't doing him any favors." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her that my son already deals with enough challenges because of his condition, and the last thing he needs is to be bullied by his own family. I said it's not about sheltering him, it's about teaching kids to be decent human beings. She got defensive and said, "Well, we're not perfect parents, but we're doing our best." I told her that doing your best includes teaching your kids not to bully someone, especially their cousin. At that point, she threw her hands up and said, "I don't know what you want from us. We can't control everything they do." I told her that if she's not willing to even try, then there's really nothing left to talk about. I got up and left, and I haven't heard from her since. Now I'm more certain than ever that I made the right decision to distance myself and my son from them. If they can't see the problem with their kids' behavior and refuse to take responsibility, then there's no point in trying to mend this relationship. I've decided to focus on the people who actually care about us and want to be part of our lives in a positive way. My son and I have been planning some fun activities for the holidays, just the two of us. We're thinking about going to a cabin in the mountains or maybe taking a trip to the beach. It's exciting to think about creating new traditions that are all about joy and love, without any of the negativity that's been weighing us down for so long. Honestly, it feels like a fresh start, and I'm hopeful for what's ahead. Update 3. So here we are at the final update. A lot has happened since the last time, and honestly, it's been both exhausting and eye-opening. Cutting ties with my brother and SIL was one thing, but the aftermath has been a roller coaster I wasn't fully prepared for. But let me tell you, it's also made me realize just how strong my son and I are as a team. After the coffee meeting with my SIL went nowhere, I decided I was done engaging with them entirely. I stopped responding to their attempts to spin the situation or guilt me into fixing things for the kids. If they weren't going to take responsibility, I wasn't going to waste my energy. Instead, I focused on my son and our new traditions. We ended up renting a cabin in the mountains for Christmas, and it was magical. We spent the whole time roasting marshmallows, playing board games, and even trying to sled. Well, I sledded, and my son laughed at me from the top of the hill. It was the first holiday in years where we felt completely at peace. But of course, family drama doesn't just fade away. A week into the new year, my mom called me in tears. She said my brother and Esil were angry because their kids were upset they didn't see us over Christmas. My mom begged me to reconsider, saying, "The kids miss you guys. They're family, and family should stick together." I told her plain and simple that this wasn't about family anymore. It was about respect and boundaries, and I wasn't going to compromise those just to keep the peace. I think that's when it finally clicked for her, because she said, "I understand, but it's just hard." And you know what? That's fine. It can be hard for her, but it's not my job to make it easier. Here's where things took a surprising turn. Out of the blue, I got a handwritten letter from my 12-year-old nephew. He apologized for making fun of my son and said he didn't realize how hurtful his behavior was. He even wrote, "I want to do better because I don't want my cousin to feel sad anymore." I was floored. I showed it to my son, and he smiled for the first time when talking about his cousin in a long time. He said, "Maybe he really means it." And this letter gave me hope that at least one of them was starting to understand. I didn't respond right away because I wanted to think about the best way to handle it. A few days later, my mom called and said my nephew had written the letter on his own, without any prompting from my brother or SIL. That made it even more meaningful because it felt genuine. I decided to write him back, thanking him for his apology and telling him that it meant a lot to both me and my son. I also said that if he ever wanted to spend time with us one-on-one, we'd be open to it. A week later, my mom arranged for my nephew to visit us for an afternoon. It was a little awkward at first, but he and my son ended up playing video games together and laughing like old times. My nephew even asked questions about my son's wheelchair and how it works, and my son loved explaining it to him. It felt like a small step toward healing, at least with him. I'm still keeping my boundaries firm with my brother and SEL because they haven't shown any real change, but I'm glad my nephew is starting to grow up and take responsibility for his actions. As for the rest of the family, it's still a mixed bag. Some relatives have reached out to say they support me, while others continue to pressure me to forgive and forget. I've stopped trying to please everyone because, honestly, it's impossible. My priority is my son and making sure he feels loved and supported. If that means having a smaller circle of people around us, so be it. One unexpected upside of all this is that my son has become more open about his feelings. He's been drawing more, writing little stories, and even talking about wanting to try adaptive sports. I think cutting out the negativity has given him the space to really thrive. Seeing him happy and confident has made everything we've been through worth it. Looking ahead, I've decided to keep building on this fresh start. We're planning a summer road trip, just the two of us, to visit some national parks. My son is super excited, and so am I. It feels good to focus on creating positive memories and leaving the toxic parts of the past behind. So that's where things stand. I'm not saying everything's perfect now, but it's definitely better. We're moving forward one step at a time and learning that sometimes protecting your peace means making tough choices. And you know what? That's okay. My son and I are finally in a place where we can just be ourselves, and that's all I've ever wanted.